The United Nations circumventing national sovereignty. That is the topic of tonight's Byline. The United Nations is looking to expand its reach once more. The bureaucrats at UNHQ, well, they're looking to find ways to accomplish the goals they seek by going around national governments. How? Well, on Friday, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon appointed former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg to be his special envoy for cities and climate change. From the announcement, Mr. Bloomberg will assist the Secretary General in his consultations with mayors and related key stakeholders in order to raise political will and mobilize action among cities as part of his long-term strategy to advance efforts on climate change. Now, why is the UN Secretary General going directly to mayors? Well, some would say it's because mayors run cities, and cities, that's where the people live, right? A cynic might say it's because the UN can't get national governments to do what they want regarding climate change, so Ban Ki-moon figures he'll go around national governments and get cities to move as fast as he wants on climate change. Maybe he can get the mayors to move. That's how Bloomberg sees his job. He tweeted this out: "As UN Special Envoy, I will help Secretary General Ban Ki-moon mobilize action among cities to fight." Bloomberg also tweeted out this photo as he promised to help cities take bold action as the UN Special Envoy. There have been lots of news reports about this announcement, mostly just regurgitations of the press release from the UN. A few added in tweets or comments from people like Secretary of State John Kerry or Al Gore congratulating Bloomberg. Here's the question not asked and not answered, though. When did it become the role of the UN to deal directly with cities around the world? The UN is supposed to be where countries can come together to find common ground, not a place where an unelected, unaccountable global bureaucracy goes around national governments to achieve its globalist dreams. Here's how the UN describes itself on its own website. The United Nations is an international organization founded in 1945 after the Second World War by 51 countries, committed to maintaining international peace and security, developing friendly relations among nations, and promoting social progress, better living standards, and human rights. Nothing in the UN Charter or the UN structure is set up for it to bypass national sovereignty. But that's where we're going now with Michael Bloomberg's appointment. It's important to remember who Michael Bloomberg is. This is the man that showed his commitment to reducing emissions and pollution by banning cars from idling in New York, and then had his staff jerry-rig a window air conditioner run while his car was parked, because his Anna didn't like a warm car in the summer. Now, if we all had staff to do that and all had really long extension cords, then we could do likewise. Well, otherwise, just forget it. Enjoy the warm car. Bloomberg is yet another do as I say, not as I do progressive who jets around the world, travels as he pleases, eats as he pleases, and then tries to dictate to others what they can do. Now, instead of just being the nanny for New York City, he has the United Nations seal of approval. Bloomberg is already chair of the Agenda 21-inspired C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group, an organization that includes megacities such as New York, LA, Houston, Chicago, London, Rome, Toronto, Vancouver, and more. Now he's going to go around the world with the backing of UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to deal directly with other cities, mayors, and town councils. It gives new meaning to the Enviro slogan: think globally, act locally. In Canada, the federal government isn't even supposed to deal directly with cities and towns because they're creations of the provinces. The feds have no jurisdiction. Let me ask you, if the feds have no jurisdiction, why the hell should the UN? This is part and parcel of the UN's diluted vision of itself as a global government, the true power source. It's not. It's an unelected, unaccountable, globalist bureaucracy that should be ignored. And this is another example of why we need to send the UN packing. It's time for Canada to leave the UN. And that's the Byline.
We've done some amazing things, but hopefully it really is just the beginning. We've shown this country and the world that you can have a great city that includes everyone, that gives opportunity to everybody, that lets them practice their religion, say what they want to say, and love whoever they want to love. All of those things extend their life, improve their kids, and it's all because of you.
Oh, lovely Bloomberg. Have you checked out this man's accomplishments? I mean, in addition to trying to get people to stop using elevators, this guy has banned smoking in public and outdoor areas. He's forced calorie labeling on restaurant menus, the fast food places, not the steakhouses he goes to. He's attempted to outlaw large sugary sodas, got that smacked down, banned trans fats in commercial foods, campaigned to reduce elevator use. Yeah, that's true. He also tried to force taxi cabs to only use hybrids. The course threw that one out. Simon Kent joins us now. Simon, do you feel better now that Nanny Bloomberg is nanny for all of us and not just Denzians of New York City?
Oh, just feel the love. Can't you feel it? Just feel the love. Look, I personally think the United Nations is about as useful as an ashtray on a motorbike. And I've seen the UN operate all around the world. And I've seen them in Africa and Mozambique, where I saw a car park collapse once in coastal Mozambique because there were so many UN aid trucks there. And the locals and the local warlords were squabbling over how they're going to divide up all the UN aid that the whole car park collapsed. I saw them in Cambodia, in Phnom Penh, when the UN got kicked out. I flew in there to Phnom Penh. You couldn't get a hotel room for 20 square miles. The UN flew in and took every first-class hotel room in that city for years and just took over the place. I mean, goodwill and feeling good and giving everyone a global hug, that's one thing. But this whole trip, it's an ego trip for so many people. And what former Mayor Bloomberg is doing is just part of that. Remember when they had in 2009 that huge international conference they had in Copenhagen?
Yeah.
Remember that climate change? Nothing came out of that. Nothing. No policy, nothing. So now, as you point out, the UN is going around federal governments and going towards local mayors to try and get something done that the rest of the world couldn't agree on in 2009. It's a joke.
And they couldn't agree on it in 2010. They won't agree on it in New York when they meet there in 2014.
Yeah.
They always have other conferences. And New York is one of the colder destinations, although it'll be in September. It won't be too cold. But normally they are in tropical places. Copenhagen was one of the rare exceptions. So this is part and parcel of what they do. But I think that citizens around the world and governments around the world should be slapping Ban Ki-moon's hand for appointing someone to go around them. This is not the UN's job.
The UN's job, quite rightly, is not to tell us what food to put in our mouth, what we should be drinking, whether or not we should be smoking. These are personal choices that people make. And yes, in some parts of the world, inequality is rife. Maybe approaching inequality, trying to get countries to stop fighting. Remember, the UN was born out of the ashes of World War II. Everyone was so sick of Europe fighting for centuries, the rest of the world. The UN was started to bring peace, to give countries, not mayors, but countries, a forum to try and sort out their problems. It's grown ever since, it's escalated, and this is just another example of how basically useless it is.
Well, to point to that, they can't fix Syria. Why do they think they're going to go around the world and get all the mayors doing what they want?
Great
and
point.
Who gives them the power to? If they're about finding peace, then why are they failing so badly at it?
Well, they certainly do fail badly at it. You look again back in Africa, look what's happening in Sudan, look what's happening in parts of East Africa, the tribalism and the fighting, the sorts of things that goes on. And we've seen history shows us where the UN has been thrust into these situations. It can never bring peace on the ground. It can never do anything. Talk is great, but talk achieves nothing.
Well, I'll tell you what, though. The world will find peace now because Nanny Bloomberg is in charge. And remember, he did speak to the UN General Assembly on occasion. Here's what he said in, I believe it was September 2011. And now he gets to spread this message around the world.
The challenges before us are too vast and complex for individual governments to overcome alone. Governments at all levels must make healthy solutions the default social option. That is, ultimately, government's highest duty.
So he's going to fly into places where people have real problems and say it's your government's job to make sure you have only healthy options to eat.
I think the first job of the UN in a lot of situations in the world is just help people put food on their table. There's so much starvation. There's so many people in the world who'd love to have the choice of whether or not to drink a soda. They'd love to have the choice of whether or not to have trans fats in their food. Trouble is, when you're starving in Asia or Africa or a whole lot of other godforsaken places, you don't have that option. The UN should concentrate on doing something to feed those people. Don't be a nanny state. I don't need people to tell me how to live. I don't need Mr. Bloomberg, or we have all these, what do they call them, special rapporteurs travelling the world, mostly travelling advanced Western economies, trying to almost bring in a form of taxation of wealth shifting from wealthy countries to less wealthy countries. And it's just not working. The UN really should go and take a long, hard look at itself in the mirror and then come back and tell us what it sees.
Simon, good talking as always.
Thank you.
We'll put it to the people. Send me your thoughts, byline@sunmedia.ca.